Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Mark Hansen moved to the edge of suburbia, he sought peace, not war. But a smiling HOA president with sharp heels and sharper intentions had other plans. When she came for his land, and then for his daughter, Mark realized this wasn't a dispute, it was a siege, and he was under attack. When I first moved into the house, I thought I'd finally found peace. After years of contracts, deadlines, and travel as a structural engineer, I wanted nothing more than to build something real, something still. A home. And this piece of land, 2 acres just outside the HOA perimeter, was my sanctuary. No meetings, no board approvals, no pastel-colored conformity, just open space, a weathered oak tree older than the country, and a backyard big enough to grow something worth passing down. My daughter Lizzie was 10 when we moved in. She'd just lost her mom. Cancer, fast and merciless. I did my best to stay upright for both of us, but there were nights I caught her curled up next to that same oak, whispering to no one. Maybe her mother, maybe herself. That tree became her refuge. So I built her a wooden swing beneath its thick limbs, then added a raised garden for tomatoes and strawberries, then a shed I poured with my own hands. Slowly, this place became ours. I knew there was an HOA nearby, Silver Pines Estates, a name so polished it made my teeth hurt, but we weren't part of it. The land I inherited from my father had never been annexed into the association. I double-checked that before the first shovel hit dirt. Still, when I saw the glossy flyer in my mailbox one spring morning, Community Expansion Opportunity, Let's Build a Future Together, I knew it wasn't just some neighborhood bake sale. I ignored it, thought it was a mistake, or wishful thinking. Then came the knock. She had the kind of smile you'd see on someone selling timeshares, tight, sharp, and wrong. Tall, in a perfectly ironed white blouse, blonde bob cut like it had been measured with a ruler. She didn't introduce herself, just said, "You must be Mr. Hansen. I'm Karen, the president of Silver Pines HOAI." Didn't invite her in. She didn't wait for one. "I'll be brief," she said, stepping across the threshold like it was her God-given right. "We've just approved funding for a new community recreation space. The board voted last night to begin site planning, and your eastern half-acre happens to be the ideal location. It's flat, shaded, and perfectly accessible from Clover Ridge Drive. It would mean a great deal to the neighborhood." I blinked. "You mean my backyard?" She clasped her hands like a school principal delivering bad news with baked-in condescension. "Yes, but only a portion. We'd naturally handle all the permits and landscaping. The HOA would maintain it. In return, your property value would increase substantially. You'd be contributing to the community." I laughed once, loud and flat. "I'm not in your community." She didn't flinch. "That's debatable. You're inside our easement buffer and—" "Nope, not debatable. I own this land outright. It's not in your jurisdiction. You can't vote to take half my yard." Karen's lips twitched, like I'd stepped out of line in her imaginary classroom. "You should consider what kind of message it sends to your daughter, Mark. Refusing to share, teaching selfishness." And there it was, the first veiled threat. "I think we're done here," I said, opening the door. She didn't move. "This isn't personal. It's just community progress." I stepped forward. "It will be personal if you come back." That should have been the end of it. But the next day, Lizzie came home talking about a new friend. "Jenny," she said. "She lives a few streets down. Her mom's super nice. She said I could come over after school." It didn't click at first. I was happy. Lizzie had spent too many afternoons alone with books and dirt. She needed someone her age. And Jenny. Turns out, Jenny was Karen's daughter. Lizzie spent more and more time at their house. She came home with her nails done, hair braided, talking about clothes she never used to care about. At dinner, she started questioning everything. Why don't we have a pool like Jenny? Why don't we go on cruises? Why don't we ever do anything fun? Then came the jab that told me exactly what was going on. Jenny says her mom says you're just mad because you don't want to help other people. She says we have this whole yard and don't share it with anyone. I dropped my fork. And she said, Lizzie hesitated, that mom would have agreed with them. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. But inside, I felt the first shift. Something rotten had started to take root. And Karen wasn't just aiming at my yard anymore. She was aiming at my daughter. I used to think brainwashing was something that only happened in cults or late-night documentaries. I never expected to watch it happen over meatloaf and mashed potatoes at my own damn dinner table. It started subtly. Lizzie began sighing at everything. My jokes weren't funny anymore. Our weekend gardening was boring, and she suddenly hated the smell of dirt. I chalked it up to adolescence, maybe grief showing up in a new outfit. But then she stopped calling it our garden. It became your garden, like I was some landlord on a forgotten farm, and she was just renting air. She spent almost every afternoon at Karen's. I tried setting limits, an hour, then home by 6, but that lasted maybe 3 days. Jenny would need help with a project, or was sad because of her parents' divorce. Karen, of course, would text last minute, "Hope it's okay if Lizzie stays a little longer. We're baking cookies and having girl time." It wasn't okay, but if I pushed too hard, Lizzie dug in her heels. I became the grump, the dictator. I started losing her the moment I tried to protect her. Then the comments started. Little barbs, sharp as fencing nails. You know, Jenny's mom said it's kind of weird that we don't have an HOA. She says it's dangerous that there's no one checking who comes onto our street. Karen said we could be so much more if we weren't so stubborn. Stubborn. That word echoed. It was the same one Karen used when she stood on my porch and offered to annex my land in the name of community progress. I tried to reach Lizzie. I offered to take her camping like we used to. She rolled her eyes. You mean sleeping outside in the bugs? No thanks. I suggested building her a treehouse. She said I should stop trying to buy her attention. She was 12 going on 30, and Karen had rented out prime real estate in her head. One night, I found a brand new pair of sneakers in Lizzie's closet, ones I hadn't bought. Designer, expensive. I knew immediately who gave them to her. When I asked, she shrugged. Jenny had 2 pairs. She gave me one. That was a lie, and she knew I knew it, but she stared me down like she was ready to fight. I paid the mortgage. I maintained the house. I put food on the table and tucked her in at night. And somehow, I was losing to a woman who smiled like a Barbie and talked like a prosecutor. I confronted Karen. I didn't plan to. I just saw her outside watering her surgically sculpted hydrangeas and walked over before I could stop myself. "You're crossing a line," I said, low and flat. She didn't even blink. "Mark, calm down. Girls talk. Friends influence each other. It's normal." "You're not just influencing her. You're manipulating her." "Oh, please," she laughed. "Don't be dramatic. Maybe if you actually engaged with the community. I'm not in your community, and you have no business giving my daughter gifts or telling her how her mother would feel." She smiled. It was the same expression people wear right before they drop a bomb. She misses her mother. She needs stability. You're isolating her. You're undermining me. I'm giving her something you clearly can't. I swear to God, I saw red, but I turned around and walked away. Because if I'd stayed, I might have said something I couldn't unsay. A few days later, I got an envelope on my doorstep, official HOA letterhead. Notice of violation, unapproved structure, shed, section 14.2. It claimed my shed violated HOA code regarding visible secondary buildings and must be dismantled within 30 days. Except, I don't have a shed that faces HOA property. Mine faces my own damn backyard. The envelope came with a second letter. Community review scheduled. Proposal for integration of eastern adjacent parcels into Silver Pines HOA. My property. Labeled as pending jurisdiction review, I nearly laughed. Karen was trying to sneak through a hostile annexation like I wouldn't notice. I went straight to the city records office. Took half a day off work. Waited in line behind a guy arguing about a septic permit for a food truck. Finally, I got to a clerk named Sharon who had the social energy of a filing cabinet but knew her zoning code like it was scripture. She pulled up my records. I wasn't in the HOA. Never had been. Never would be unless I signed off. But then she frowned. "Huh, that's odd." "What?" "There's a supplemental filing from Silver Pines HOA. They attached your parcel to a map and submitted it as part of a proposed jurisdiction expansion. It's marked as community buffer property now." "That's illegal." "Not technically. They can propose it. It doesn't make it enforceable, but it can start certain procedures." I leaned in. "What kind of procedures?" "Well, pressure campaigns, assessment surveys, code violation checks. Enough paperwork to make most folks throw their hands up and give in." I clenched my jaw. I'm not most folks. When I got home, Lizzie was already at Karen's. Again, I stood in my backyard looking out over the garden I'd built. The old swing, the dirt under my nails. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about grass or fences. This was a siege, and Karen wasn't just knocking at the gates anymore. She was already inside. It didn't take long for things to escalate from irritating to invasive. Karen didn't believe in subtlety anymore. If this was a chess game, she'd stopped playing pawns and started slamming rooks across the board. One morning, I opened my mailbox to find a printed notice, stamped with the Silver Pines HOA emblem and taped shut with actual red tape. Community hearing notice. It read in bold, bureaucratic font. The subject? Unified Recreational Development Initiative, Parcel Integration Vote. There was a diagram, a color-coded aerial map of the neighborhood. My land, my backyard, my garden, my swing under the oak was shaded in bright orange and labeled Phase 1 Community Enhancement Zone. I wasn't just on the radar now. I was the target. The hearing was to be held in 2 days at the community clubhouse, a stucco monstrosity that looked like it had been designed by a retired cruise ship architect. I wasn't invited. The notice was just a courtesy notification, but I showed up anyway. The room was packed with 30 or 40 residents, seated in folding chairs under fluorescent lights. There were cookies and bottled water on a side table, like this was a PTA bake sale instead of a land grab. Karen stood at the front, flanked by a whiteboard and a projector. She wore a pastel blazer like it came with built-in moral authority. "Thank you all for coming," she beamed, clicking her remote. The first slide was titled Greener Horizons, A Shared Future. Silver Pines has always been a model of harmony and thoughtful planning, she began, her voice honeyed. Today, we take the next step. We have a chance to expand our shared recreational access, to build something for the children, for our health, for our legacy. And we do that together. Slide 2 was an overhead shot of my property. She pointed to the orange zone. This area here is currently underutilized. It's a large, flat parcel adjacent to our community. We've opened preliminary discussions with the homeowner, who we believe is open to collaboration. She smiled right at me. I stood up. Bullshit. Gasps. Literally, someone spilled coffee. "I'm Mark Hansen," I said, stepping forward. "That's my property on the screen. I've had no discussions. There is no collaboration. And I'm not part of this HOA. Karen didn't miss a beat. "Of course, Mark. We're merely presenting a vision, a possibility. You've always been welcome to reconsider your stance on community involvement." I turned to the room. "None of this is legal. You can't vote to take my land. I've already confirmed it with the city. If you're using your HOA dues to pursue this, you're wasting your money." A man in a golf polo near the front raised a hand. "But wouldn't it increase your property value?" "That's not the point," I snapped. "It's mine. You don't get to repurpose what doesn't belong to you." Karen intervened. "Let's maintain civility. We'll continue this discussion in executive session." "Thank you, Mark." She moved on without missing a beat. I walked out before I put my fist through their cookie tray. That night, someone spray-painted "selfish prick" on my trash bin. The next day, I found crushed soda cans and gum wrappers strewn across my garden beds. Someone had snapped the tomato cages in half and jammed sticks into the soil. Lizzie came home after dark, her mood stormy. When I asked where she'd been, she said, "At Jenny's." "We had a community talk about your behavior. Karen says you're turning people against each other." "Karen's turning you against me," I said, before I could stop myself. Lizzie stared at me like I'd slapped her. "She cares about me. She listens." "Because she's trying to get in my house through the back door," I muttered. She slammed her door so hard the windows shook. I needed proof. Actual legal-grade proof. I started documenting everything. I installed cameras around the perimeter, including one pointing at the oak tree and another at the shed. I photographed the damage to my garden and filed a vandalism report with the sheriff's office. The deputy was sympathetic but non-committal. "Kids, most likely," he said. "Hard to press charges without faces." That weekend, I caught them. Motion alert, 2 a.m. I pulled up the footage and saw 3 teenagers in hoodies creeping along the property line. One of them peeled back my garden fencing. The other 2 sprayed a message on the shed wall. "Join or leave." I paused the video, zoomed. One of the kids looked familiar. It was Jenny, Karen's daughter. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I couldn't believe it, but because, deep down, I already had. I called the police. This time, I filed a formal complaint, naming names. The responding officer asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, for now. But I wanted the incident on record. Karen showed up at my door an hour later in yoga pants and a Patagonia vest. pretending to be concerned. I just heard there was an issue, she said, tilting her head with fake sympathy. Your daughter vandalized my property. Her mouth twitched. Oh, Mark, let's not escalate. They're just kids. You know how they are. I didn't reply. I just handed her a printed photo from the security footage. Her face went pale for a split second before she covered it with a smile. Well, I'm sure there's an explanation. There is, I said. And I've got more angles if you'd like a copy. She turned stiffly. You'll hear from the HOA about this. I'm counting on it. By Monday, I'd received 3 more violation notices, including one for improper exterior lighting, the camera-mounted motion lights I'd just installed. Karen wasn't giving up, but neither was I. And now I had her on video. There's a moment when you realize your child no longer trusts you, and it doesn't come with fireworks or shouting. It comes quietly, like the sound of a door clicking shut, not from anger, but distance. That moment came the morning Lizzie didn't come home. She'd stayed over at Jenny's before, sure, but she always texted me. Always. This time, nothing. I called her. No answer. Texted. No reply. I drove to Karen's house at 7 a.m., still in yesterday's shirt, tired and sharp-edged with dread. Karen opened the door like she'd just stepped out of a catalog. Good morning, Mark, she said sweetly, holding a mug that probably said Mom Fuel or some shit. Where's Lizzie? She's sleeping. The girls had a movie night. I didn't want to wake you so late. You didn't think not telling me where my daughter was would be a problem. She sipped from her mug. I thought a night away might help her reset. She's under a lot of stress living in, well, such a tense environment. You mean her actual home? Karen tilted her head. She's safe here. Maybe safer. I stepped forward. Go get her. She's sleeping, Mark. I don't think barging in is healthy. I stared at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a smug neighbor. I saw someone who genuinely believed she had the moral right to interfere in my family, that she knew better, that she was, somehow, the better parent. I'll wait, I said. She didn't move. I'm calling the police, I said. That did it. Lizzie came out 10 minutes later, looking guilty and irritated. You're being overdramatic, she said, shuffling past me in pajamas and Jenny's hoodie. We were just watching movies. Without telling me. Again. She didn't answer, just slammed the car door. Again. Back at home, she didn't speak to me for hours. Then, around lunch, she dropped the real bomb. I want to live with someone else. The words sucked the oxygen out of the room. I set down the sandwich I hadn't touched. Excuse me? I want to stay with Jenny's family. At least for a while. Karen listens. She doesn't yell. She doesn't make everything a fight. Lizzie, she's trying to turn you against me. She's trying to help me. She snapped. I clenched my hands in my lap. You're 12. You don't get to choose where you live based on who lets you stay up late and eat ice cream for breakfast. She stood, knocking over her chair. You're impossible. And then she locked herself in her room. That night, I stared at my ceiling for hours. Something had to change. If Karen was going to exploit the cracks between us, I had to close them myself, but not with yelling, not with force, with something official, protective. The next morning, I called my sister, Emily. She lived a few towns over, a high school counselor with the patience of a monk and the spine of a steel beam. She'd always been close with Lizzie. I need a favor, I said. 2 days later, Lizzie was packed and in Emily's car. You're sending me away? She screamed when I told her. No, I said gently. I'm giving you space. With someone who's not manipulating you. She's not manipulating me. Lizzie cried, eyes full of fire and confusion. You're just scared because someone else cares more than you. That hurt. God, that hurt. But I let her say it. Because arguing would only drive her further away. Karen, of course, had something to say. She showed up an hour after Emily left, furious. You can't just hand her off like a package, she snapped. Watch me. She's terrified. You're traumatizing her. She's with family, a licensed counselor, not you. Karen's eyes narrowed. You'll regret this. I already did. The next day, I received a visit from a social worker from CPS. Mr. Hansen, we've received a report regarding potential emotional instability and inappropriate discipline. We're here to conduct a welfare check. I knew immediately who'd made the report. I invited them in, showed them Lizzie's room, her clothes, the books she'd left behind. I explained that she was with her aunt, gave them Emily's contact info. The caseworker nodded, took notes, asked if I had any mental health diagnoses or recent arrests. I kept my answers short and clean. An hour later, they left, unconvinced but without cause. But the damage was done. Now I was officially on file. That night, I found another envelope taped to my fence. HOA community reminder, non-conforming attitudes create unrest. Below it, in fine print, please review your position and consider supporting the ongoing recreation initiative for the good of our youth. I crumpled it and tossed it into the fire pit. Then I went inside and called my lawyer. Hiring a lawyer felt like calling in an airstrike on a skirmish, but I was out of options. Karen had declared war, and I needed someone who spoke fluent ordnance. Charles Hayes wasn't flashy. He didn't have a billboard on the highway or a catchy radio jingle, just a cramped office above a tax preparation place and a reputation among pissed-off property owners as the guy you called when the HOA stepped out of line. He looked like he hadn't slept in a decade and sounded like a man who'd been sued by every neighbor he ever had. Perfect. He sat across from me, flipping through the files I brought. Maps, certified mail, violation notices, printouts of HOA flyers, copies of the CPS report, even the grainy security footage of Jenny vandalizing my shed. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and scratched his jaw. "Well," he said, "she's not subtle. I'll give her that." "So?" I asked. "So you've got a case. Maybe 3. Charles explained it plainly. Karen had overstepped on multiple fronts. She'd submitted false documents to the city regarding parcel jurisdiction. She was using HOA funds to target a non-member. She was inciting a community campaign bordering on harassment. And, cherry on top, her daughter was caught on camera committing vandalism. That alone could get Karen barred from HOA leadership. But more than that, Charles said, tapping one of the flyers with his pen, "You've got a pattern. Coordinated pressure, defamation, possible manipulation of a minor. You're not just a grumpy neighbor, Mark. You're a victim of organized civic abuse." I wasn't sure whether to feel validated or deeply disturbed. Next steps? We file. Civil suit. Harassment, defamation, attempted encroachment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We name Karen personally and the HOA corporately. That'll force their hand. And Lizzie, he paused, for now, keep her where she is. Stable, until we force a ceasefire. I left his office with a folder thick enough to be a manifesto and a creeping sense that things were going to get uglier before they got cleaner. Within a week, Charles had drafted and filed the complaint in county court. I was officially suing Silver Pines HOA and Karen Lynn Whitaker for damages, injunctive relief, and declaratory judgment that my property was outside their jurisdiction. Karen responded exactly how I expected. A formal countersuit landed on my porch, filed on behalf of Silver Pines Homeowners Association. It claimed I had created an atmosphere of hostility, psychological manipulation, and neighborhood instability. It also accused me of failing to provide a nurturing environment for a minor and endangering the emotional development of youth within the community. They were framing me as the villain, not just a stubborn landowner, but a threat to the social fabric of the neighborhood. Karen knew how to weaponize bureaucracy like it was a kitchen knife. The real twist came 2 weeks later at the city clerk's office. Charles and I were reviewing HOA meeting minutes, dry reading, unless you're hunting for corruption, when a man tapped me on the shoulder. He looked about my age, early 40s with a clipboard under one arm and a tired expression that said he'd been putting up with Karen a lot longer than I had. "You're Mark, right?" "Yeah." "Name's Peter Sloan. I used to be on the HOA board." "Used to?" He glanced around and lowered his voice. "I heard what she did to you. It's not the first time." Charles perked up. "Go on." Peter looked like he'd swallowed nails. "Karen's been fudging votes for years. Not outright fraud. More like engineering. Rewording proposals last minute, skipping quorums, strong-arming new members. Last fall, she submitted a map expansion draft that included your parcel. Told us you were open to discussion. No one ever saw the consent form, but no one wanted to challenge her. Because she crushes people, embarrasses them publicly, files complaints, gets creative." Charles leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" Peter hesitated, then reached into his clipboard and pulled out a flash drive. Minutes, internal emails, and a PDF of the expansion map she edited. It was supposed to stay in committee. She pushed it through solo. I took the drive like it was a live grenade. If she finds out you gave me this, she won't, he said. Just make it count. Back at Charles's office, we loaded the files. It was all there. Email chains showing Karen pressuring board members, skipping required notifications, altering maps. One message from Karen read, "He's too isolated to fight this. Once the daughter's on board, he'll cave." That was the smoking gun. She'd admitted her strategy was to use Lizzie to break me. "This changes everything," Charles said. "We're not just fighting a zoning dispute anymore. This is calculated coercion." The next day, Charles submitted a motion to the court for injunctive relief and filed a formal ethics complaint against the HOA board. He also sent a copy of the files to the local newspaper, anonymously. By Friday, a headline ran in bold font on page 1, "HOA accused of coercion targeting private landowner in expansion plot." I didn't smile. Not really, but I did sleep better that night. The thing about public exposure is, it doesn't just turn up the heat, it melts masks. Within 2 days of the article running, the tone in the neighborhood shifted. People who once waved awkwardly or avoided eye contact started offering nods, even hushed greetings. A few left envelopes in my mailbox. No names, just short notes. "She did the same thing to us. Stay strong." One had a $20 bill taped inside. I didn't know what to do with that one. I framed it. HOA members started to split into 2 camps. Those who still backed Karen out of fear or pride, and those who began to realize they'd been ruled, not represented. I wasn't naive. Most of them weren't defending her because they believed in her. They were just hoping not to be next. The real blow came in the form of an emergency HOA board meeting, called just 3 days after the article dropped. Peter Sloan leaked me the agenda. Item 1, temporary suspension of Karen Whitaker's authority pending internal ethics review. Item 2, discussion of legal exposure. Item 3, vote of no confidence. I didn't attend the meeting. I didn't need to. I watched it unfold on a blurry live stream someone posted to Facebook. Karen walked into the clubhouse in a beige pantsuit, like she was going to war. She left 30 minutes later, clutching a folder, red-faced, flanked by silence. By morning, her name was scrubbed from the HOA website. No announcement, no ceremony, just a blank space where her title used to be. The Queen had fallen, but like any cornered animal, she didn't vanish. She lashed out. The following week, my mailbox was ripped out of the ground. My motion lights were smashed. Someone keyed the side of my truck. Nothing too drastic, just small acts of petty spite. But they had Karen's fingerprints all over them, figuratively at least. She was unraveling. Then came the GPS trackers. I found the first one under the back wheel well of my truck, a tiny black rectangle with a blinking blue LED. I found the second inside a fake rock near the base of the oak tree. Whoever placed them wasn't subtle. Either that or they wanted me to know I was being watched. I brought both to the sheriff's department. They ran the serials, cheap retail models, sold in packs, no fingerprints, no ownership trail. The officer didn't say it outright, but his shrug said what I already knew. We know who did it, but proving it, that's the trick. Still, I added it to the file. More weight for the scales. Then came the knock. Not Karen, worse. A woman in a gray blazer and square glasses stood on my porch holding a badge and a folder. "Mr. Hansen, I'm Special Investigator Teresa Ramos, District Attorney's Office. We're opening a criminal inquiry into recent HOA activity in Silver Pines." I stepped aside and offered her coffee. She declined, just opened the folder and began asking questions. She'd seen the footage, the emails, the article, but what piqued the DA's interest wasn't just the civil violations, it was the potential criminality, falsified documents submitted to the county, financial misuse of HOA funds, evidence tampering, coordinated harassment. "This isn't just about your daughter or your land," Ramos said. "We believe Mrs. Whitaker may have engaged in a pattern of abuse targeting multiple residents over several years. You might not be her first victim, just the first who fought back with teeth." She asked if I'd testify. I said yes without thinking. When she left, I stood in my kitchen a long time. That word echoed in my head. Victim. I hated it. But she was right. That's what I'd become. And I hated it a little less knowing that I wasn't the only one. 2 days later, Peter texted me, "Check the HOA forum." Thread, "What she did to me." I logged in through a dummy account. There were dozens of posts, stories, screenshots. HOA members describing fines they never voted on, backdated notices, surveillance complaints, One woman claimed Karen threatened to report her husband's business if they didn't take down their Halloween display. Another man said his teenage son was followed home after he refused to mow his lawn twice in 1 week. And then there was the one that gutted me. My husband had stage 4 lymphoma. We fell behind on yard maintenance. Karen left a letter on our door warning us we were in breach of community health codes. She never even knocked. He died 2 months later. That night, I drove out to see Lizzie. I'd kept my distance since the CPS visit, not wanting to stir the pot while we built our case. Emily met me on the porch. "She's still hurt," she warned, "but she's watching." I sat across from Lizzie in the living room. She didn't speak at first, just stared at her phone. Then she said quietly, "Karen called me last week, said you were trying to ruin her life." "And what do you think?" I asked. She looked up. I don't know anymore." I told her everything, not in anger, not as a lecture, just facts. I told her what Karen had done to me, to others, that she tried to use Lizzie to pressure me. I showed her the emails, the security footage, the GPS trackers. When I finished, Lizzie didn't say anything. She just stared at the floor. "Do you hate her?" she asked. I paused. "I hate what she did. I don't have room to hate people anymore. It eats too much." Lizzie wiped her face with her sleeve. "I feel stupid." "You're 12, I said. "You're supposed to trust adults. You just trusted the wrong one." She nodded slowly, and for the first time in weeks, she moved closer to me. I didn't cry. Not then. That came later, after she went to bed, and I stood outside under the oak tree, staring up at the stars, breathing in the quiet that finally didn't feel like a threat. The courthouse wasn't glamorous. No high marble arches or sweeping staircases, just beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and that faint smell of paper and bureaucracy. But as I stood outside courtroom 3B, waiting for the hearing to begin, it felt like the final battlefield. Lizzie sat beside me in the hallway. She was quiet, but calm. She'd agreed to testify, not because I asked, but because she wanted to. That mattered more than she knew. Charles adjusted his tie for the 5th time, flipping through his annotated binder like it was a holy text. "They're going to push every emotional angle," he muttered. "Don't react. Let their own words bury them." Inside the courtroom, the judge, an older woman with no time for nonsense and half-moon glasses that looked like they could dissect lies on their own, called us to order. Karen sat across from us at the respondents' table, flanked by 2 attorneys in shiny suits. She wore black, like she was in mourning for her reputation. Her expression was somewhere between disdain and martyrdom. The first witness was Peter Sloan. He spoke carefully, evenly, with the dry precision of a man who had rehearsed his integrity for years. He laid out the manipulated votes, the internal emails, the reworded proposals Karen slipped through without consensus. Every line item, every shady maneuver. Then Charles pulled up the footage, Jenny spray painting my shed while giggling with 2 boys. The courtroom was silent except for the clatter of the recording. Karen didn't look up once. Next came the emails. Charles walked the judge through them like breadcrumbs in a forest. Each one chipped away at her story, Karen pretending to act on behalf of the community while privately scheming to annex my land and alienate me from my daughter. One email hit like a slap. "He'll break eventually. The girl's already on our side. He won't want to lose her too." When Charles read that aloud, Karen finally looked up. Her expression cracked for a moment, jaw clenched, mouth twitching, but she said nothing. Then Lizzie took the stand. She sat tall, her hair in a tight braid, her voice trembling only once. "She made me feel like my dad was the problem," Lizzie said. "She told me my mom would be disappointed in him. She said he was being selfish and that everyone in the neighborhood thought he was dangerous." Karen's attorney tried to object, claimed hearsay, manipulation, but the judge overruled it. Lizzie kept going. "She gave me things, clothes, electronics. She said I deserved better, that if I kept pushing, maybe my dad would learn to think about other people." The courtroom didn't breathe. I didn't either. Charles nodded to me. It was time. I stepped up and testified. Not with drama, just the truth. About how I'd inherited the land, how I'd built it for my daughter, how I was never part of the HOA, how the complaints began the moment I refused to give up control. I walked the judge through every notice, every violation, every escalation. I told her about the CPS visit, the broken mailbox, the GPS trackers. I kept my voice level, no anger, no theatrics. Just the sound of a man who'd been cornered and decided not to run anymore. Karen's attorney finally tried to spin it. She was a pillar of the community. The kids were just being kids. Her actions were misunderstood, driven by a desire to improve cohesion and safety. Her contact with Lizzie was maternal concern. Then Charles pulled out the last exhibit. Private message from Karen's HOA account, uncovered in a forensic audit of her board communications. It read, "The easiest way in is through the daughter. That yard is wasted on that man. I'll have that land in a year, or he'll be gone." The judge called for a recess. I walked out into the hallway, numb. Lizzie stood beside me, her hand in mine. Karen walked past us minutes later, flanked by her lawyers, face stone white and silent. When we returned, the judge didn't waste time. She ruled that the HOA had exceeded its authority in every attempt to encroach on my property. The expansion vote was invalidated. All previous violation notices were nullified. The court issued a permanent injunction prohibiting the HOA from contacting or targeting me, my land, or my daughter. Then she turned to Karen directly. This court finds evidence of bad faith, coercion, and abuse of administrative power. Further investigation into criminal misconduct is already underway, and I suggest you prepare accordingly. Karen didn't speak, didn't even blink. She just stared straight ahead, like the room had turned to static. When the judge banged her gavel, I exhaled for the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, the sun was blinding. Reporters waited, some already typing. I ignored them. Lizzie squeezed my hand. "Can we go home now?" she asked. For the first time, I knew exactly what that word meant again. Life didn't magically fix itself after the trial. There was no parade, no overnight redemption, but it got quieter. And that, more than anything, felt like victory. Karen's name popped up in the news a few more times. A follow-up investigation uncovered misuse of HOA funds for community outreach expenses, which included unauthorized cash reimbursements, luxury lunch meetings, and even a massage chair shipped to her address, marked as Board Wellness Initiative. She was removed from her position permanently. No appeal. The district attorney pursued misdemeanor charges for document falsification and harassment. Nothing that would land her in prison, but enough to stain her record and keep her out of power. HOA members eventually held a special election. Peter Sloan was elected interim president. His first order of business? Dissolving the HOA's power to annex adjacent parcels ever again. Karen moved out a month later. The house went up for sale quietly, the kind of cash-only listing that screams desperation. She didn't say goodbye, didn't try to apologize, just vanished like smoke after a fire. The HOA itself limped on, neutered and cautious. Monthly meetings shifted from covert scheming to bake sale logistics and potluck coordination. No one mentioned my name, not in public, but I noticed more nods on the street, more cars slowing slightly instead of speeding past. A kind of neighborhood detente. We didn't become friends, but we stopped being enemies. Lizzie came home 2 weeks after the ruling, not for a visit, not for a trial run, to stay. She walked in the front door with her backpack over one shoulder and a quiet look in her eyes. I told Emily I wanted to come back, she said. I just nodded. "You sure?" She nodded back. "I want to rebuild the garden." We didn't say much more that night. We just sat on the back steps under the old oak tree, the swing creaking in the breeze like a heartbeat. The space between us wasn't empty anymore. It was healing. The next weekend, we tore down what was left of the shed. Not out of defeat, but renewal. We rebuilt it together, stronger, better. Lizzie even painted a mural on one side, a field of wildflowers growing out of cracked earth. Her idea. Some days we'd still find reminders, a shredded flyer caught in the fence, a nosy neighbor jogging past a little too slowly. But we didn't flinch anymore. The cameras stayed up. The mailbox was reinforced with steel. I filed the HOA's permanent injunction paperwork in a fireproof safe. At dinner one night, Lizzie asked, "Do you think Karen really thought she was doing the right thing?" I took a long breath. Maybe. Or maybe she just thought no one would stop her. Do you think people like her ever stop? But people like us learned to see them coming. Lizzie nodded like she understood, like she'd aged a decade since that first flyer appeared in our mailbox. Spring came early that year. The tomatoes thrived, the strawberries bloomed. We planted sunflowers this time. Lizzie said they reminded her of hope, of something tall and defiant, reaching for light no matter what tried to cast a shadow. I didn't argue. We never got our old life back. but we built something new in its place, stronger, rooted, and, most importantly, ours.